But first, Tunisia has announced a new unity government headed by the incumbent prime minister to ready the country for elections. This comes after violent protesters overthrew the president after a 23-year rule, forcing him to flee the country. The atmosphere remains tense, with protesters urging the revolution to continue in a bid to force radical changes in government. Well, for more on this, I'm now joined live by Professor Hall Gardner. He's a political scientist from the American University of Paris. Thanks very much indeed for joining us here on RT. Tunisia is a popular tourist destination, a relatively stable country, buffering Europe and Africa, and now we see this turmoil. Could this threaten Europe?
Well, first of all, I've been to Tunisia on many occasions in the past when it was supposedly a safe, calm respite for tourists. But in fact, you could have felt the tension at that time. There were probably 4 times as many police than military. It was definitely a dictatorship, a police state. And so the idea that this was going to change, I mean, people knew at some point it was going to explode. The question was when. So in terms of affecting Europe, I really don't see a major problem for Europe in the sense, Europe itself, in the sense of massive immigration or something. But in fact, I'd say the opposite. I think a lot of Tunisians in France want to go back to their homeland to help out, to change the situation. Many were chased by the dictatorship and want to return. But the problem is changing rapidly enough and democratically enough and beginning to really develop the country. Because right now, after this, it's going to be an economic downswing for a while until the economy can come up. But the country's been under such a monopoly of power, both from the Ben Ali family and also the fact that the French have monopolized the economy, that it has to open up. It has to begin to accept new investment and new money to come into the country to help move it in the right direction.
You were saying a little earlier it wasn't a question of if, but a question of when this could happen. But it happened very, very quickly. Could not something like this perhaps trigger more instability in the region, other North African countries perhaps, or even further to Middle Eastern countries?
Right. I think the 2 main candidates are actually probably Libya, because of its secular dictatorship under Gaddafi. Gaddafi, I think, really fears this revolution as symbolic, a demonstration effect for Libya. Therefore, he probably he could interfere in this process and try to jam up the work somewhat in Tunisia. At least that's one perspective. But I think the main problem is probably going to be Egypt, where Mubarak knows he has to handle the succession. He knows he's going to die soon. He can't just give over the government to his family, as he's been talking about, which is exactly what Ben Ali was talking about just before this insurrection took place. So those 2 countries, I think, are more likely than maybe even Morocco or Jordan, who are under monarchies and who probably can manage this situation a little bit differently. But the main problem for most of the Middle East countries and Islamic countries in general is what I call the youth bulge or the youth surge. A large percentage of young men entering the workforce who don't have opportunities for jobs. And this is a problem from Pakistan, Afghanistan, throughout much of the Middle East.
Okay, what we've seen here is a secular coalition coming to power. That there could be a sense of stability coming and that people are getting what they want there in Tunisia. But you mentioned pressures on other countries. Is there not a danger when we see incidents like this that religious radicals could actually exploit the chaos and come to power?
Well, the one religious party, the Nada party, is actually, I would say, a more progressive Islam, at least in its propaganda. It talks about multi-party democracy. It talks about rights of women. It isn't the kind of radicalism, the Wahhabist style, or what we see in the Taliban. So I don't see that. But they will enter the government, and they will influence the population. But remember, the Tunisians are highly educated. They're very westernized. They're on the internet. The young people are they identify with Europe. I really don't see them identifying with Islam. But if the economy doesn't pick up, you may see more turning towards Islam if you can't get the new democracy on the move.
You know the country, seeing what's happening now. What are your thoughts about the future? Will we see stability? Will this new government cope with the situation, or could we see further violence flare up?
Well, I really think I would propose some sort of international aid project as the process goes, because the country's economic situation deteriorated under this dictatorship. It's it needs more competition, it needs more investment, it needs some international encouragement. If it doesn't get that, then it could simmer, it could begin to create fissures in the rest of the region. Another problem is to integrate the region. We have to start talking about a regional integration process, bringing Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria into a larger economic community. And this idea has been held back by these dictatorships and their petty fiefdoms trying to control the area as much as possible. So regional integration, more investment, and a process of democratization seems to be the best route for the country.
Professor Hall Gardner, political scientist, joining us there from the American University of Paris. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis on the situation.
Thank you.